So I want to welcome everyone here tonight. This is really nice. My name is Dolan. I'm with the Sons of the American Revolution, and what that means is I have traced my ancestry from the present all the way back to the Revolutionary War, and I have relatives that actually fought in the Revolutionary War. He was a tavern owner in Bedford, Massachusetts. And so what I'd like to do is show you the end of my presentation. We're going to end with this flag over here. So now you know where I'm going to end. Now I have to take you back to the beginning, in fact, before the beginning, because what I know is many of you are going to ask me, where did flags come from? Well, originally they were nothing more than little pieces of cloth hanging on a stick, and we used to call those banners, and they were used by the military to show forward, back, left, right, and they would give commands from horses. However, in the 13th century, the 1200s, when the English went to the Crusades, when the knights returned, they passed through a city in Italy called Genoa. And when they passed through Genoa, they found that there were big pieces of cloth hanging from sticks throughout the entire city, and they looked like this. This is called St. George's Cross. They took it back to England. The King of England liked it so much that this became the very first flag of England. It's St. George's Cross, and it went back around 1210 to 1230 AD from returning people from the Crusades. So I want you to look at this because my next flag is going to be an interesting one. I'm going to jump forward 400 years. In 1603, England went to war with Scotland. England was ruled by Queen Anne I. Scotland was ruled by King James VI. And King James had the flag of St. Andrews. During the war, Queen Elizabeth passed away, and Queen Elizabeth had no children. She was not married, so England had to search for the next closest heir to the throne, who happened to be King James VI. King James VI then became the new ruler of England and Scotland, and he named himself King James I. Now, there was so much controversy going on at that particular time that he wanted to show people that he wanted to bring the countries together. So if we could take St. George's Cross and put it together with the flag of St. Andrews, if you can use your imagination, it would become the King's colors. Now, the King's colors then became the new flag of Great Britain. This was the flag in 1607 that came to Jamestown. It was also the flag on British vessels that would have visited Plymouth Plantation. It's called the King's colors. Now, I'm going to jump forward a little bit and then go backwards because I want you to see how this becomes the flag that we have today. In the early 1800s, Ireland wanted to become part of Great Britain. The Irish flag is the flag of St. Patrick. So when we formed the United Kingdom, or when they formed the United Kingdom, they superimposed this onto the King's colors. And if you're using your imagination well, you can now see the flag of the United Kingdom. And if you're really good, you can see the three flags that this is made from: St. George's Cross, the flag of St. Andrews, and the flag of St. Patrick. So that's where flags originated from, and I really wanted to focus on the flag of the United Kingdom, or Great Britain, the previous flag, because that was the flag of the Revolution. I jumped ahead about 60 years. I'm going to get rid of this one. So that's the origin of flags. So if we take a look at that, and I take you back now to 1775, April 19th, Lexington and Concord, the shot heard around the world. If we could go back to 4:30 a.m., when the dark of night was becoming those silver shards of dawn, we would see approximately 100 colonists farmers mostly, across the field from 900 bright red redcoats, the finest fighting army in the world. Captain Parker took a look at this. He said, disperse, live to fight another day, and as they took off, one musket accidentally went off, which was the shot heard around the world. The colonists regrouped at the North Bridge in Concord, Massachusetts, and now 1,200 colonists have showed up to fight the 900 British. Years later, Ralph Waldo Emerson would write the famous hymn that said, by the rude bridge that arched the flood, their flag in April's breeze unfurled, and there the embattled farmers stood and fired the shot heard round the world. But what was that flag that unfurled in April's breeze? Very few of you know what that flag is. This flag was carried by Nathaniel Page from the Bedford militia. I'm happy to say that the Bedford militia mustered at the Fitch Tavern. Sergeant Jeremiah Fitch is my ancestor, and he owned the tavern. They mustered there, and Nathaniel Page carried this flag, which had been in his family for over 100 years. It is considered to be the oldest flag of the American Revolution and the only flag that flew at Lexington and Concord. On it in Latin it says, conquer or die. I couldn't think of a more appropriate motto for the American Revolution. It is the Bedford flag. If you were to go back to Bedford, Massachusetts today, it is still in an archival room in the library for public viewing. The Bedford flag. Excuse me? Yes, it does. My family's tavern still exists, and it's number 12, the Great Road. That's the original address of it. And when you go back there, yeah, I'm very, very proud of that. And the woman who bought it is an attorney who lives in, who works in Boston. And they said they came over to her right after she bought it, and she said, of course you'll be open on April 19th, won't you? And she said, why? At which point they explained it to her, and she has been open April 19th ever since she purchased the property. So the next question would be, what flag did the British have at the time? Well, the British did not carry a flag to Lexington and Concord, but they did have a flag, and the flag was changed ever so slightly from the King's colors in 1703 by Queen Anne. She took the flag of England and moved it up into the Canton area, which is where we know that's area that describes the stars, and made the rest of it all red. So it's called the Queen Anne or the Red Meteor. I want you to look at this flag because I'm going to come back in it to this flag in just 2 more flags. So just put this in your memory. I'm going to come back to it. So that would have been the flag that was flying over Boston, occupied by the British. Well, April 1775, shot heard around the world. May 1775 was the Continental Congress, and George Washington was chosen as the general of the Continental Army. He left Philadelphia, yes, the capital, Philadelphia, and went up to Cambridge, Massachusetts. On his journey, he carried this flag. It's called the Washington Headquarters flag, and wherever he went, after being named commander of the Continental Army, this flag flew over George Washington's tent and traveled with him as the battles took place. Interesting enough, I want you to notice it is a blue background with white stars. But the most important thing I want you to look at is the number of points on the star. According to English rule, to be a real star, you have to have 6 or more points. So, George Washington's headquarters flag, white stars on a blue field with 6 points. Now, George Washington took his time traveling to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and in so doing, he stopped at many, many countryside villages and towns to let him know what he stood for, what he was doing, and what the Continental Army would be doing, because he knew he needed to generate public interest. When he rode into Cambridge, Massachusetts, he was greeted by this flag, the Grand Union flag. Now, the Grand Union flag is actually Queen Anne's flag, which had the British flag here. It was all red, and they added 6 white stripes to it. What it said was, we are 13 separate and independent colonies separate from England. And that was the flag that greeted George Washington. He liked this flag so much that in January of 1776, he adopted this flag as the official flag of the Continental Army. Most people don't know that one. I got ahead of myself just a little bit because I wanted you to see what greeted George Washington when he arrived July 3rd in Cambridge, Massachusetts. In August 1775, George Washington is standing on Prospect Hill in Cambridge, Massachusetts, looking out over the Atlantic Ocean. By this time, 15,000 troops had shown up and encircled Boston and kept the British within the city limits. Keeping those people inside the city limits, he thought, they can't go out into the countryside, they can't get food, they can't get firewood, they're done. Until he saw this uninterrupted highway of ships easily moving in and out of Boston. Now, the funny thing about that is George Washington is an army man. He was a frontiersman. He was used to fighting in the woods. He didn't see any need for a navy. But somewhere between August 10th and August 20th, it came to him, I need to have some ships. He wrote to the Continental Congress. Continental Congress said, nope, we have no money for ships. You can't have a navy. So he went to one of the wealthiest colonists he knew and said, I need some money so that I can get a navy. It happened to be a woman, and it happened to be his wife. Martha Washington funded the very first navy of the colonies. And when George Washington got that, this became the official flag of the United States Navy. It's called the flag of Washington's cruisers, and on the top it says, an appeal to heaven. That was a common expression used by John Locke at the time. Appeal to heaven for good health, an appeal to heaven for bountiful crops, a general expression used then. And if you were to go all the way from Massachusetts down to Georgia, you will find pine trees. So the pine tree was selected as the symbol of Washington's Navy. Now, in August of 1775, those rascals called the Sons of Liberty, who worked on the docks and would drink in the same taverns that the British did in Boston, found out that the British had been storing gunpowder and ammunition in Bermuda. George Washington dispatched the Lady Catherine, one of his first ships, down to Bermuda to capture the powder and munitions. When he did that, he sent Captain Isaac Hopkins. Now, when he took control of his ship, he took this flag, and this flag was the flag from Christopher Gadsden, a member also of the Continental Congress. This is called the Gadsden flag, and this became the flag of what they called the flagship, show where the commander of the Navy was. On this one, Ben Franklin loved the rattlesnake. And the reason he loved the rattlesnake as the symbol was because the rattlesnake has no eyelids, so they always appear to be open and ever present and always watching. The second thing about the rattlesnake is it never strikes without first being provoked. The second thing is when it does strike, the fangs are in the upper part of its mouth, it shoots them out and drives them down into its prey and does not let go until the prey has died. And finally, the rattlesnake doesn't strike without first giving a warning. Now, this is not true, but I'm going to tell you because it's a great story. Ben Franklin also said there were 13 rattles on the end of a rattlesnake. Not true. It sheds its skin on a regular basis, and the number of rattles change. But 13 was a nice number, and he told a good story because he said one rattle on the end of a rattlesnake, when it shakes, is almost imperceptible to the human ear. But when 13 shake all at once, it becomes a formidable sound. Here's the interesting thing about this flag. When Isaac Hopkins went from Cambridge down to Bermuda, he flew this flag. Yellow means disease or plague is on board, so his ship was never attacked. When he got down to Bermuda, the magazine that held the munitions had only a single British guard who was unarmed. When the colonists showed up, it wasn't a fight. They simply went in, took what they needed, and rolled it across cobblestone streets at about 2 a.m, probably making a racket and waking everyone up, but no one seemed to respond to it, got it on the ships, and took it out of Bermuda. Very, very helpful to the American Revolution. Now, here's the thing that's really interesting. If we were to follow that group of people down through history, what we would find is those men on that ship, just 4 months later, were the foundation of the United States Marines. So the next time you hear from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, remember their humble beginnings on the beaches of Bermuda. Well, as I'd indicated before, George Washington fought 1776 under what appeared to be the Grand Union flag, which was a British flag with those stripes that had been added to it, through 1777. And on June 14th, 1777, the Continental Congress passed what we know as the Flag Resolution. And the Flag Resolution stated that the American flag would be 13 alternating red and white stripes with 13 white stars on a blue field representing a new constellation. No drawings, no models, no descriptions. Now, I want you to know I'm a retired teacher. And I know that if I had 30 students in my classroom right now and I stated in this ear right here, the flag resolution is, and then you have to pass it along to 30 different people, sometimes that story changes by the time it gets to the last person. So what I'd like to show you is the interpretation of the flag resolution, 13 alternating red and white stripes, 13 white stars on a blue field representing a new constellation. The first one I'd like to show you is the Battle of Bennington. The Battle of Bennington. Colonel John Stark went up against John Burgoyne, one of the finest British generals during the Continental forces that they engaged. Well, anyway, Colonel John Stark, his wife made this flag for him. I'd like you to notice two things about this. She used the rules of British heraldry and said the top stripe and the bottom stripe have to be white, and the stars have to be 6 or more points in order to be a real star. Since we declared our Declaration of Independence in 1776, she put 76 on here, and this was the flag they carried into battle. Very unusual flag, because if we were to look at this flag on a blue sky with white clouds, the top stripe blends in with the clouds and seems to disappear. So now the blue canton seems to stick up above the red stripe. Kind of odd looking. But the other thing that happens is the bottom stripe is also white, and when you take a look at that, that too disappears. So now we have this odd-shaped top and a very narrow flag, but no one knew any better. It does have 13 alternating red and white stripes and 13 white stars on a blue field. And if I take a look at this, how many points on the star? We have 7. We have 7. So that makes it, according to British rule, a good flag. Well, as Colonel John Stark was fighting John Burgoyne, he was losing, when suddenly, bang, there is a shot fired from the tree line. As he looks over to the tree line, he sees some reinforcements coming. When he looks closer, he notices that they are carrying a green flag. All right, I'm in the state of Washington. I couldn't help it. But they probably could have used the 12th man from the Seattle Seahawks. I just want you to know that. No, that was not the flag. The official flag was actually this one. It was Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys returning from their battle at Fort Ticonderoga. Interesting thing. We don't know much about this flag other than a conversation that took place with Ethan Allen. And he said, there's no way I want to carry a red, white, and blue flag through the forest where they can see me coming. I'd rather have a green flag that matches the forest background. But he had a 5-pointed star on here, and we don't know why. So these are all the different interpretations of the American flag. Well, not only were battles being fought on land, but they were also being fought on the water. And John Paul Jones, you've heard of John Paul Jones, on the Bonhomme Richard was dispatched from the United States to go to Europe with 2 tasks. 1, to bring back some necessary supplies that we didn't have here, and 2, if he could engage any British ships, to sink them. So John Paul Jones took off, made it across the Atlantic, went up around the northern point of England and came down on what we now know as Scotland, where he engaged a ship called the Serapis, finest fighting British ship that they had. The battle lasted 6 hours, but within the very first shots that were fired, the Serapis hit the Bonhomme Richard right at the waterline, and it started taking on water. At the end of 6 hours, the Serapis had been demasted. It couldn't go anywhere. The Bonhomme Richard was sinking, but it still had sails. And of course, when one of the sailors asked John Paul Jones, "What are we going to do? We're sinking," John Paul Jones replied, "I have not yet begun to fight." I don't know if he said that, but it sounded good, didn't it? So anyway, he managed to put the sails up on his ship, sail over to the Serapis. His crew swung aboard, and they captured the Serapis. They managed to get some small sails and masts up and sailed away as they watched the Bonhomme Richard sink into the ocean. They pulled into the port of Texel. He had the boat re-outfitted. He had the masts and sails fixed. And he asked the sailmaker, "Do you know what the American flag looks like?" And she said, "Absolutely." I said, the U.S. ambassador to Paris sent out a diagram and a drawing. Now, do you know who the ambassador to Paris was? Ben Franklin. And Ben Franklin loved to socialize and drink maybe a little more than he should. So when the boat was fixed and ready to sail back to the United States, they sailed under the Serapis or the Texel flag. Yeah, maybe he socialized a little too much. But the beauty of this particular flag is everyone knew what the flag was supposed to look like with alternating red and white stripes. So when he flew home, when he sailed home and flew this flag, he went unencumbered his whole way back because no one recognized this flag. When they arrived back in the United States, of course, the battles were still taking place. And the next flag I'd like to show you is from Guilford Courthouse, North Carolina. Remember I said if you start a story over here and you send it all the way over to the other side, you might get a different interpretation? Guilford Courthouse was when Cornwallis wanted to leave the coast and make a bold entry inland to strengthen the British position. When he got to Guilford Courthouse, although credited with a win, suffered huge losses. This was the flag that flew over Guilford Courthouse. Now, I do have to show you my favorite flag. My favorite flag is Easton, Pennsylvania. Easton, Pennsylvania was where they stored the Liberty Bell during the American Revolution. And it truly is my favorite flag. 13 alternating red and white stripes, 13 stars, white stars on a blue field representing a new constellation. I love this flag because as we add states, what do we add to the flag? We add stars. And there's plenty of room to add stars here. And I say this because if we had gone on with the typical tradition when we originally started adding stars and stripes, that was the flag for the Star-Spangled Banner that flew over Fort McHenry. It had 15 stars and 15 stripes. What I wanted to show you is, if we continued on that vein, do you know what our flag would look like today? Oh, no. This is what it would look like today. 50 stars and 50 stripes. That flag makes so much more sense. Well, designs went on, and I'm coming down to my last two flags. And the next flag that I'd like to show you was put together by a member of the Continental Congress, and his name was Francis Hopkinson. Francis Hopkinson submitted this flag. Now that is really interesting because it looks so much like our flag today. Why wasn't it accepted? He submitted a bill to Congress. It was not paid, and in some of the notes in the Continental Congress, it said he stole the design from so many other people they could not pay him and not pay others, but he didn't know who to credit for the rest of the design. So this flag was never accepted as the official flag of the United States. It's the Francis Hopkinson flag, and the Hopkinson flag is sometimes called the Alliance flag because this flag flew over the Alliance ship, which was the new ship built for John Paul Jones when he returned from England on the British vessel. So this was called the Alliance flag. Now I'm going to show you something that is probably the biggest bit of trivia, and that is, I'm going to show you this flag again today. Team USA. The official design of the United States Olympics uses the Hopkinson flag, presented in 1781, but never adopted by the Congress. So now we come back to our final flag. And the final flag, and you probably know what this one is, the Betsy Ross flag. Interesting thing about the Betsy Ross flag is the top stripe is red, the bottom stripe is red, and the stars have 5 points. 3 people met with Betsy Ross in Philadelphia: George Washington, Robert Morris, and George Ross. The second 2 were members of the Continental Congress, and George Ross was actually Betsy Ross's uncle. They met for an hour. No one knows what they said. No one knows what the discussion was. What they do know is after that discussion took place, she submitted a bill. The bill was accepted and paid, and this is the flag that resulted. Why? We know 2 decisions were made. The top stripe and the bottom stripe would be red. The stars would be 5 points. I'm going to show you why that's important. For just a moment, let's pretend this is a white piece of cloth. With just a few simple folds of this white piece of cloth and a single snip of a pair of scissors, Betsy Ross could produce a perfect five-pointed star. And that's why she insisted on a 5-pointed star. Excuse me? No, I think what it was, the question was she lazy? I think what the answer really is if you can make it better, faster, and cheaper, the government wants to give you the contract, to be honest with you. So I think that's really where it came from. Because it's very difficult to cut a 5 or a 6 or a 7-pointed star. Excuse me, a 6, 7, or 8-pointed star. But the 5 you could do with just one cut. And then, of course, the fabric would have been less waste. But anyway, so with that, I just wanted to let you know, from beginning to end, as Paul Harvey would say, that is the rest of the story and how we got the American flag. So with that, I thank you. And I would be more than happy to take questions. Any questions? I'm going to tell you a story then, and I hope you enjoy this one because we are in the state of Washington. In 1889, when Washington became a state, there were 38 stars on the flag. Dakotas became North and South Dakota for 39 and 40. Montana came in for 41, and Washington came in as state number 42. And that was in 1889. On July 4th of the following year, they always adopt the design of the new flag. 42 stars. The flag makers decided we're going to get a head start and we're going to start making 42-star flags. On July 3rd of 1890, Idaho became the 41st state. And on the 4th of July, they authorized a 43-star flag. So the 42-star flag was never an official flag. There are 4 of them that I know of in the state of Washington. 2 are in the state archives in Tacoma. One of them, if you happen to take a tour of the Capitol, is in the Rotunda. These are all original flags, but not official flags. The 4th one is the personal property of Governor J. Inslee that has been in his family for over 100 years and is beautifully framed in his office if you ever get into his office. They happen to have an open house on inaugural night. I snuck in there, I took a look, and there it is, and the flag is only about this big. It's not a very large flag. So if you could ever find a 42-star flag, it would be fantastic. However, be prepared to spend large amounts of money for that flag. So anyway, that's my final story for tonight about the Washington state flag and how our star got displaced by Idaho. So anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a good evening.